All right. Welcome everybody to the Cleveland Blockchain and Crypto Group. We're so excited you could come with us today. I know it's been about 5 weeks or so since we last met. As a reminder, we do this about once a month. We'll probably start trying to target the last Wednesday of every month going forward. Maybe we'll skip some here and there, maybe in the summer months or something like that, but generally, depending on the demand, we're going to try and keep to that schedule. So very excited you could be here and go through a couple introductory things. First, so in terms of what we're going to go through, so of course, typical starter to every session, give a little bit of a disclaimer, go through our mission and vision to remind everybody. We always start with a safety message, a security message, and then lay out some ground rules. So the first thing is a disclaimer. Mainly what this is saying is that myself, Justice, nobody in this room, nobody's giving you financial advice on anything. We are talking about an asset class that is extremely risky, extremely volatile. So definitely exude caution. And again, nothing we say is financial advice. And if you're looking for financial advice, talk about the financial advice. Here's we got in there. You can't choose the wrong altcoin, be less than all of them. Yeah, be careful.
Financial advice.
Be careful, not financial advice. All right, mission and vision. So the Cleveland Blockchain and Crypto Meetup Group, we are a group of blockchain enthusiasts who are seeking opportunities to learn, educate, collaborate, and build with others in all facets of Web3. Participants prioritize their personal security while always maintaining a positive and respectful attitude. And our vision is to enhance societal good in the greater Cleveland area, built on Web3 rails. And do we have an update there today? Okay. Security tips. I know we already hashed a lot of this, but it's just still so important. I'm not going to go through everything on this screen, but the main thing is that it is extremely risky. There are lots of scams in this space. If you don't basically personally know somebody you're talking to and they're trying to guide you through anything crypto related at all, you should be extremely skeptical. Again, there are lots of scams, especially if you start self-custodying your own crypto and you start diving into like Discord groups and such. There are very predatory people out there who are trying to steal from you. So they might sound extremely helpful. They might message you really quickly and say, hey, I can help you with that. And you should basically ignore it because 99% of the time it's very, very careful when you're diving way over the deep end and going to self-custody and to DeFi and going off exchange and such. It is a crazy, crazy world out there. And if you are going off exchange, if you are going to be doing stuff, I highly recommend you get a hardware wallet. And for those who don't know what that is, but some popular brands are Trezor, Ledger, Lattice, etc. Those store the private keys on the physical device itself, so that even if somebody were to have full remote control over everything on your computer, there should be no way that they could compromise your assets because you confirm everything on a piece of external hardware. So be very careful. If you have more than you feel you can afford to lose or be very upset losing in a self-custody wallet that's not a hardware wallet, just assume that your computer or whatever device you're using, cell phone, Mac, etc., they can always be compromised and you might not know it. So please, hardware wallet. It makes it a little more annoying, a lot more annoying. We can click a bunch of buttons on an external device every time you do anything, but I'm telling you, you will sleep a lot better at night if you do so. All right, ground rules. As always, respect others' opinions and experience levels. We have a very diverse group in here. Some people are extremely seasoned. Some people are very, very much beginners, so please respect everyone's experience levels. Crypto is an area where people can have lots of varying opinions, and everyone could be right, everyone could be wrong, partially right, partially wrong. So we're all entitled to our own opinions. So if you're going to disagree with someone, make sure you're doing it without being too disagree. Try and respect others, don't talk over others. And everyone probably has their own favorite pet project that they like, and it's okay for you to talk about it, give a little background on it, but don't, say only talk about your favorite crypto and then say everything else is garbage, stuff like that. We don't want to hear that. We're here to, again, respect everyone's opinions. And of course, as I said already, nothing here is financial advice, but again, we want to make sure that we're not pushing too heavily in that front. And of course, I already mentioned, acknowledge the extreme volatility and risk that comes with crypto. There's volatility and risk, as we've seen over the last year, massive highs and lows in every kind of crypto asset. So it is a very risky space still. So be careful. There's another thing before yet. I can relate. Right here. It all started when I started learning crypto. All right, brief introduction. So myself, I was writing articles a lot for crypto, and then I had a baby 2 months ago, so I've been taking a little break from it. But maybe we can come back to it soon. But I'm really passionate about this space, and I thought that the Cleveland area needed a group like ours so we can spread the wealth of knowledge that we have in the very exciting space. So that is my in-person IRL name. Online on Twitter, I go by Ludex. There's my little in the T that I have as my profile picture, and that's me. So next, I'm gonna pass it over to Justice, who's gonna go over some exciting announcements, and we will continue on here. So here's my good friend Justice.
What's up, everybody? Glad you guys are here. My name is Justice Quander. Let me read this thing here, who I am. I work in enterprise software delivery and help software teams scale their delivery process. And so my day job is that, and it revolves around process engineering. My other two full-time jobs is DAO researcher, really revolving around DAO type work. Web3 evangelist, and recently elected governance solution engineer at Bankless DAO, team of 5, which I'm still got goosebumps about that. My Web3 identity is 0xjustice.eth. Raise your hand if you've heard of .eth. It's like bring attention to this. Okay, so if you haven't, I just want to bring attention to this because this is a notable thing. The idea here is what blockchain and Web3 unlocks is true self-sovereignty, okay? Right now, if you want to purchase a domain name, for instance, Joe's Nails or something, Joe's Hardware Store, you buy that from an international organization called ICANN, and at any point, if ICANN doesn't like the way you're using that domain, snap, it's gone. What's interesting, this Web3 opened up the possibility for this .eth, like you own that domain. If everyone in the world doesn't like it, tough luck on that. So some people signal their self-custody and the vision behind this by grabbing the .eth and using that as their signature identity. Okay, so I wanted to do a recap, just real quick. Last month we did the deep dive on NFTs. We had Evan give us the whole story behind CryptoKitties and the whole story behind that. We looked at 4 different types of NFTs. Does anyone remember generative? Raise your hand if you remember generative. Okay, raise your hand if you remember participation. Okay, token gating. All right, for you, dynamic. Real quick recap, generative is basically allows an artist to create thousands of versions of their art by having very small changes that overlap within every combination that is created. That's what you see a lot of this NFT art. Participation is the idea that you can attend something online or in person by scanning a code. You get a special NFT that proves you were there. Like saving the ticket stubs from the music show. Token gating is you purchase an NFT, and this NFT entitles you to access either in some digital access, PDF, documentation, community access, okay? And then the third dynamic, which is the new stuff that's coming out, and this is the idea that you have an NFT and there are properties of that NFT that change based upon other realities in the world. So for instance, your NFT looks like a soccer player of one team, and if the team wins, there's an oracle watching and will update on-chain data. If that team wins, suddenly your NFT is the property changes and it's showing a bunch of sparkles shining or something like this. Visual changes, or maybe it's worth something and before it wouldn't have been given those changing properties. So that's a recap. I wanted to give a friend of ours opportunity to plug an event that's coming up that's pretty big. Tech moves fast. Tech moves at the speed of light. Web3 moves FTL, faster than light. And so Moose is going to tell us a little bit about what's coming up.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Musan King Jr., NFT project here locally. And I'm a part of a committee that was organized by the City of Cleveland, United Black Fund, and Jumpstart Ventures. And the idea behind the committee is to create a diverse tech ecosystem here in the City of Cleveland. So this is baseline the next 4 years for this initiative. One of the people on the committee, I'm in charge of speakers, entertainment, culture, engagement, and most important, Web3. There are a few of you in the room that I've already spoken with over the last couple of months that I'll probably be reaching out to. But anybody at all that's interested in providing any kind of support behind this event, that, like I said, this is a City of Cleveland event. The idea for this initiative really is to create a system in Cleveland where we're able to capitalize on technology and have it benefit all of the industries that occupy the city. So this is huge, and it'll be obviously for my generation, but it'll be big for everybody who's even around the city too. So let me know at all if you want to be want to help. It's probably going to be announced sometime over the next month or so. We'll probably talk about that in our next meeting, how people need to see what this thing is and how you start talking about it. So soon, hopefully the next meeting will have more detail. But bookmark October 21st and 23rd.
Okay, so we have an announcement. This is cool. The whole idea about this meetup, partly, was to say let's go from a meetup to an event, or recurring events to a DAO. That's the shoot for the stars type idea. The DeFi happened over COVID. The NFT explosion happened. DAOs became on their way to becoming a household term. And the idea was by dipping into the DAO energy and dynamics and tool set, we can actually bring more value and greater fluidity to an event like this. And so one of the first steps after kicking off this event, you think about this, we've only been doing this a couple months, is approaching some DAOs to enter into a sponsorship relationship with them. And so I'm happy to announce that we have our first sponsor from Bankless DAO. Okay? Now, this is real notable. It's notable for us, obviously. It's also quite notable for the Bankless DAO community, because this is their first in real life sponsorship of an event. And so this is their trust to say we will prove the model on how we measure return on investment, how we do all this, and how we direct people and show them what Bankless DAO is about in exchange for this sponsorship. And I have a feeling as this unravels, we're going to get a whole lot more sponsorship. So I just want to take a few minutes to explain to you guys what Bankless DAO is. Now, I'll tell you full disclosure, I'm a big fan of Bankless DAO. I'm a member of Bankless DAO. And in fact, 2 people in this room came from Bankless DAO, and that's how we got connected to get this startup, or this meetup going. Okay, so Bankless DAO is a decentralized community to coordinate and propagate bankless media, culture, and education. Its goal is to drive adoption and awareness of truly bankless money systems like Ethereum, DeFi, and Bitcoin. It achieves this goal through the collective participation of its community. How this started was through the Bankless podcast. The founders and the host of the Bankless podcast said, we're kicking off the DAO. They kicked off and basically the community was born. And the exact opposite of the way people think happens, after the community was born, the community voted to give the Bankless DAO founders some compensation for their efforts and stuff. But the Bankless DAO is an autonomous, self-directed entity. It's wild, and this picture kind of communicates a little bit of that. To point out just a few projects from Bankless DAO, we have the Bankless Consulting. The idea here is there's a lot of businesses out there that want to incorporate Web3 and what falls under that umbrella. And Bankless DAO is a collection of people that come alongside businesses and explain how to come on board, how to augment their system and processes. So that's Bankless Consulting. Next up, we have Bankless Academy. Bankless Academy is a kind of, remember several years ago when you were learning to code, you go to the interface and you would say, hey, try this, and you have like your own console. You would type something and be like, wrong, try again. You step you through. In a similar way, these are real interactive, visual heavy step through on like wallet basics. What is these type of, what's an ERC20? And so Bankless Academy is really spearheading that mission to educate people into self-custody, right? Which is a step beyond buying a decentralized exchange and hoping to value. To give you an idea, just a rundown of Bankless DAO, this is their wiki. It's organized by guilds and projects. If you just want to have fun and you're interested in a particular area, legal issues, you can hop in, click that, join the legal guild, and be interacting with many attorneys in there. and legal experts that put out newsletters, and so there's a lot of learning opportunity, and not all blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of fun too. And then this is a picture, this is actually a map. Not 100% up to date because this thing's a living creature. It's changing moment by moment. But this is a map automatically generated from the Discord of a real time as of when I took the picture of individuals in the DAO. If I were to zoom in, you can zoom in interactively and see coordinators, members, you can see the entire ontology of the DAO. Now, what we did is a part of this sponsorship, we asked for the money in a multi-sig. Raise your hand if you know what a multi-sig is. Awesome, okay. A multi-sig is like this. With cryptocurrency, if I say, hey, I want to give you guys $5,000, okay? If I just send it to one person, we have to trust that person. A multi-sig is a special wallet that has many other people's signatures on it. And you set rules to say, listen, X of X people need to sign a transaction for any money to come out of this. So 5 of 7, 2 of 3. So this symbolic deposit to us, really, we help cover our expenses with the donations from you guys when you come in at $10. And this, we're considering this the seed deposit to Cleveland DAO. This is the beginning. The multi-sig, first little deposit to make that happen. Okay, so to add a little color before we get into stuff, everybody has a particular aspect of Web3 that they enjoy or that they really jam on. We really love the term Web3 because it's an inclusive term that captures all these different aspects. It's not fun to say Web3 is a term, I like trading, and you don't like trading, so we ain't in the same tribe. All of these features are made possible by this movement of Web3. Up here you see these kind of 6 general areas of Web3. We have blockchain, the technology, cryptocurrency, there's the currency element. You can have blockchain without currency, right? So it's separate. Smart contracts, NFTs, the metaverse, and DAOs, organizations run by code or who operate with digital currency underneath it. So all of that comes together to be different aspects under Web3. Our aim is to reach out to other meetups that had stopped meeting during the COVID shutdown that maybe fall at a different location under this umbrella. Maybe they're Solidity developers. Maybe they just are in NFTs, traders, DAO specific, blockchain rails, and say, listen, let's accrue our resources to maybe have the same location we can all use, do a shared event with breakouts under the different specialties, but that's the idea of this. Okay, so tonight we have the pleasure, we're going to look at 2 things. We're going to look at proof of work, proof of stake, digital assets, and then we're going to look at some privacy stuff in light of increased regulation and whatnot coming out. Greg's going to do it.
Thanks, Justice. Appreciate that. All right, when Justice and I envisioned this group and we thought about things that we could talk about, we each have our own areas of expertise and passions. And this was one of the things that I thought of early on that I was probably one of the most exciting sessions that I knew we were going to have. And that is talking about digital assets, talking about some of the different technologies that differentiate a lot of these top crypto. And then, of course, what are those top assets? Why do they have so much value? If you go to something like CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko, what are all? There's so many different, there's 10,000 coins over here. What are they? What differentiates them? Why are they so valuable? And it is a very large rabbit hole to go down. So we're going to try and do a 10,000 foot, give you some basic terms, definitions. And we assume a little bit that you know, like at least basically what a blockchain is. But otherwise, we're going to try and give it to you in simple terms. Even for some of our experienced folks, I would hope that you can pick up at least half of you in here. Be able to pick up some things from this. So in terms of introduction here, we've heard things maybe consensus, scalability, decentralization, coins, tokens, layer 1s, layer 2s, roll-ups, forks, stablecoin. And what are all these things? How do they interact with digital assets and blockchains? What does it mean? And maybe some of these are things that you might want to think about looking deeper into, whether it's an asset you want to be involved with or work on, or something you want to own, or anything else. So we're going to go over some common digital asset and blockchain concepts because And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go into roughly the top 25 or so digital assets by market capitalization and give you a little bit of a rundown of their history, some of their use cases, and maybe you'll get a better idea of why they're worth what they are. All right, so first thing I want to make sure I talk about is consensus. Consensus is a very important concept when it comes to blockchains. It is also extremely complicated, so I just cannot take all the time to get into it. But it is one of the main things that talks about, we talk about when we think about security and verifying transactions, right? So the consensus mechanisms, they help with the Byzantine generals problem. Has anyone heard of that in here? Byzantine generals problem? Two or three, four maybe, okay. Okay, so like it's a computer programming game theory thing, right? Which describes the difficulty decentralized parties have in arriving at a consensus without relying on a trusted central party. In a network where no member can verify the identity of other members, how can members collectively agree on a certain truth? Consensus is like the entire thing that lets you prevent things like double spending in blockchains and making sure that everything is legitimate in the highest degree of chances possible. So different blockchains, different digital assets, they generally have different consensus mechanisms. Some have some trade-offs between each other, and we will be talking a bit into that. So there's a lot of different consensus mechanisms. I'm sorry if the color scheme here is a little rough to see. But if you're going to look at the top 100 or so, really almost all of the digital assets, 98% of them probably are using either two forms of consensus generally. One's called proof of work, and one's called proof of stake. Proof of delegated stake is very similar to proof of stake or delegated proof of stake. And generally, so you might have heard these terms before. And so at a high level, proof of work, that's the consensus mechanism that Bitcoin uses. It uses compute power, where you define expensive computer calculations. This is what Bitcoin mining comes from. Right, so any blockchain that uses proof of work, they are minings generally, and a reward is given to the first who solves each block calculation. They're very complex, or just a computer problem doesn't have to be complex, but it could take a lot of compute power to get to the right answer. And by having lots and lots of hash power, compute power on a network, it means that if you want to try and trick the system to saying a transaction happened that really did it, or you want to try and print a bunch of Bitcoin for yourself, you need to have more than half of the total compute power in that network, which is basically impossible. So that is one consensus mechanism. The original for Bitcoin, proof of work, and then again, miners compete with computer power to be the first to find a solution there, which they get the rights to mine the block, which happens every 10 minutes. A little bit of a different twist on it. So the quote miner of a new block in the blockchain is chosen in a deterministic way, depending on how much stake they have. All these different blockchains choose that in a ton of different ways. The miners don't receive a block reward, but they collect network fees as a reward generally. And this one's considered to be much more energy efficient. So when you think about the energy usage proof of work versus proof of stake, probably proof of stake maybe uses 1% or less of the energy of proof of work. And it is definitely a topic of discussion. I will say that they both have their advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to go deeply into what those advantages and disadvantages are. Personally, I believe there is room for both of these to exist forever, and they have tons and tons of advantages. And I actually think that would be really great innovation-wise for them both to exist forever. But some people, regulators, et cetera, they look very quickly at this and they make some assumptions on proof of work about that more energy equals more climate change equals bad, but there's so much that goes involved into it where this is actually can be very beneficial to climate change and energy consumption, how we use it. But unfortunately, that's not what the topic of today's discussion is, but that's a little bit about proof of work versus proof of stake, the two most common consensus mechanisms in blockchains. By the way, any questions? Feel free to raise hands anytime you have a question. So the question is proof of work more kind of like a brute force attempt at solving a problem? Yes, it basically is. So how it works, again, I'm not going to go too deeply into the tech here. I'm going to use Bitcoin just because it is the biggest example of proof of work. There actually aren't many proof of work crypto or digital assets out there. And so basically what it is whatever the current hash power on the network is, which could be pretty massive when you think about globally what it is, there is kind of a deterministic calculation that's done so that what amount of power would need to solve this problem given this hash power in 10 minutes, basically, the 10-minute hash. So basically, however much hash power is on the network at the time, it always sets it to that it's going to be solvable in that around that 10-minute time frame, basically. So the more hash power you have, the harder the problem is. The less hash power you have, the easier it is, and it comes down to where basically that problem is solved every 10 minutes. And people use things like mining pools in order to, because if you were to plug in one miner into your Bitcoin miner into your outlet and try and mine Bitcoin, you'll probably sit there for years and never ever mine. But if you join a pool with tons of people, and you get a small percentage of that every time that pool mines one, well, then you're probably going to get some through that. Generally, though, like proof of work mining, especially in the Bitcoin with very specialized hardware, that's really left to a lot of very large, focused organizations because it is very competitive, extremely energy intensive. So mining isn't as lucrative as maybe it once was, just because of the traction that it's gotten. But yeah, so that's a little bit of work. So good question. Okay, so one thing I want to get into, excuse the quality of the picture here. The concept that's really important to understand when you think about blockchains and what makes them valuable from each other is there's a concept called the blockchain trilemma. Some people say that some cryptos have this solved today. They have it solved tomorrow or maybe later this year. But generally, almost every crypto asset, digital asset that exists today in terms of blockchain technology, they usually sacrifice on one of these for the benefit of the other two. So that's scalability, which think of throughput, think of speed, think of transactions. So the more that transactions you can have in a given amount of time, the more scalable it is. And then security, right, in terms of how difficult it would be to overtake the network and how much calculation is done there. And then decentralization, right? How many people in the world can participate in validating or mining versus if it's just centralized authorities or some of those things, they can make it much quicker and more efficient. So generally what happens is if you want to get really good, you can't have all three of these things, right? And generally pick one or two, you'd be really good at that, and the other one you're probably going to sacrifice. Bitcoin and Ethereum, we get into them a little bit. The two biggest assets, those both definitely sacrifice as of right now on the scalability vector of this. They're both extremely highly secure, extremely decentralized. Potentially the only two digital assets that would actually be able to stab off a nation state type attack. A lot of the digital assets, a lot of the crypto assets, based on their nature, if there was a nation state that had enough money, may be able to do a 51% attack on some of these other technologies. That's up for debate. But generally, this is the trilemma, and again, some digital assets say they solve all three of these pretty well, but in reality, there's still a lot that's being developed in this space. We'll get into that a little bit. Any questions? Yeah.
So is there any blockchain platform right now who has solved this problem apart from Meetup?
I love that you put that disclaimer there. So the question was, is there any blockchain out there that has solved this apart from maybe Ethereum 2.0, which is coming out later this year? It depends on how you define some of these things, right? Especially the decentralization one. Some people think centralization has different meanings, right? So if there are some blockchains that maybe, for example, like Solana, which seems to be very secure, scalable, the centralization is very tricky. They got a bunch of validators, there are people in the community, but then they all have to get together and coordinate when there's issues and stuff like that. So it's really fully decentralized. So it's really tough. In my opinion, and again, it's all about opinions here, right? Nobody's fully right or wrong on probably anything on this subject, but I don't think anything quite yet has really solved this. But there's this concept of modular blockchains, which Ethereum 2.0 uses. I know they're getting away from the Ethereum 2.0 name. But potentially there's going to be tons of innovation in this area where this might be a thing of the past. But generally, when you think of things like layer 2s, which I'm going to get to in probably 2 slides here, if you think about the layer 2 option, that should provide scalability where you can have a ton of security and decentralization. And if you use things on layer 2s, that would give you the scalability element. So in that perspective, you could even say a lot of layer 2s based on Ethereum do solve all three of these, right? So. But there's a little bit of centralization factor on some of those too. Great question. All right, another thing I wanted to get to, thank you Binance for letting me use this graphic. So this is coins versus tokens. You might have heard both of these concepts. Extremely important to understand the differences between these. So coins, those are generally, it's a digital currency. It's usually what you use in a particular blockchain to say, for example, pay the fees right? And it's very, very attached to the protocol, the technology itself, right? When we think of coins, we think of having a coin, think of it. And when I go to the digital assets, I think like 80% of them are going to be considered coins of the top 25 or so. And think about it, like Kevin O'Leary has a great way of explaining this, where it's like, think about it, you're investing in software, right? Like when you think of coins, you're investing in the software technology of that blockchain, of that platform, and it has different advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons compared to other blockchain technologies that might make it an asset worth investing in or maybe not. They all have very, very different attributes, not going to get into all of them today. But coins, when you think of coins, they're basically what makes a particular platform thrive. Generally considered safer, less manipulable, etc. And that's and they have very predictable like inflation schedules and things like that. That's coins. When comparing tokens, generally considered again, there's adoption in this area, probably somewhat of a safer asset to own. Tokens, on the other hand, these are digital assets issued on a particular project. Most tokens that you hear of these days, they're ERC20 tokens. They're based on Ethereum being just the biggest smart contract platform that lets you create these tokens. But that's the thing, excuse me, anybody can create tokens and call it whatever they want and create as many of them as they want and say they're worth whatever they think that they're worth. So when something is a token versus a coin, you should immediately pause and have some skepticism and say, okay, what is the use case for this? And it's like, if there is a centralized authority behind it, can I trust them? Because, excuse me, tokens, I would say off the bat would be a riskier one to look at. However, there's also plenty of use cases for tokens as well. None of us really probably have the smarts to be able to create our own blockchain. So if we want to create our own projects that we think would use a token model very well, we have the ability to do that. We can use another blockchain that's already out there. No question,
yeah. So I went out and download a sample contract with Slimming models and I created an ERC20 token, right? So I can put in my value and everything else. So I'm looking at it and thinking, well, what kind of value I can send to somebody if they accept it as value? I couldn't figure out is it a coin if it gets accepted into an exchange and it's legitimized and maybe did an ICO? But I'm looking at my smart contract and I'm thinking, well, it's got value, it's got the symbol, it's got the name, it's got everything in there. So why isn't my token a coin?
So that's a really good question, right? So the question was, I'm going to get back here so I can get the mic back over. So the question is, we compare tokens and coins, and you can create them, and they seem to have value. You can send and receive them, etc. So they seem to behave like a coin. What's the difference? Is that kind of where we're at? So you said a great point there. Also, you mentioned about the difference between exchanges, right? So centralized exchanges, right? They definitely offer both coins and tokens. You can buy both of them. They have a pool, a bunch of them they have, and they have an order book system. When you're looking on those centralized exchanges, they behave somewhat similarly because they're basically custodying those coins and tokens, and they let supply and demand to know how much they're going for, basically. But I think is generally, like, say, so first of all, an exchange would have to accept those, right? You have to give an exchange a reason enough to list your token, which takes quite a lot. So, any small projects, let them know to accept it in there. And if you want to have it offered in a decentralized fashion, well, you generally need to do it through decentralized protocols such as liquidity pools, which means you have to match kind of stable coin or some other asset to go along with it to give people the liquidity to buy and sell into it. Because otherwise, if you can send it to anybody, you can send and receive it, but if you didn't exchange it for anything like stable coin or real assets, did you really get anything from it? So without having either deep liquidity in a centralized exchange or a decentralized liquidity pool, where is it actually getting its value from? Because then it's dependent upon users out there actually interacting with those to drive the price of it up or down. You can start tracking it in a lot of different ways. Did I answer that okay?
It did, so clearly I didn't do an ICO, there's nothing behind it, there's no real value there. So the tokens that are on, say, an exchange, those people that are showing value, liquidity pool, they did an ICO, there's something there, they've got a white paper, they've got multiple trade.
So the exchanges generally, in terms of, they all have, there's actually like a consortium of of all the big top exchanges, so like Coinbase, Binance, FTX, all these different exchanges, they all get together and they have this list of how they assess digital assets. And so yeah, things like the legitimacy, how often they're traded, how much of them are located on wallets, is the owner of it KYC, like what's the use case of it. There's a huge, and they're generally also looking to make sure that they're not considered securities too. Right, so they think a token could like really crosses the line to be a potential security. Generally, they're going to put a little more rigor around it too. And different exchanges have different definitions of what they think is security or where there's risk in listing them on their exchanges. So it's a pretty long list. But it already needs like a market cap and traction that's relatively high for them to generally accept it. But there's a whole list. I don't know if it's public or not, but there's a whole list that centralized exchanges use to say, okay, yes, we'll list it. But generally, involves you giving them a ton of those coins so they'll hold on to it, custody it, and then you build the order book system around it. And then they also need to show that there's actually been volume in it in a decentralized fashion, or that the application, the decentralized application that might use that coin, that there's definitely traction behind it. Already thousands or tens of thousands of people getting behind it. So, launching your own token to try and get to make it worth something one day, that is not an easy effort. 99% of them definitely fail, and they don't have liquidity where you can find them. And generally, they're tied to decentralized applications where they give the token out as part of fees. There's staking things. There's tons of applications you can use for different tokens, but generally, it is definitely extremely challenging to launch one of these and give it a use case. But DAOs, right, are a great example, right? So, we might create our own token for Cleveland DAO. And we already mentioned the Bankless DAO. They have their own token because they've got a lot of people behind it. In order to get into Bankless DAO, is it still 35,000 bank tokens you need to hold, and that price fluctuates. And once you have it, that is your entry fee. So that is your ticket into the Bankless DAO. And if you show them that you have your public wallet that owns 35,000 bank tokens on the Ethereum blockchain, and you are whitelisted to join that Discord server and participate however you choose. So, millions of different use cases. We can't get into all of them here today. But the main point I'm making with this is that since anybody can make tokens for any reason, and you're going to look at those as potential assets to maybe purchase and hold, just know that the volatility is extreme. The liquidity is generally very shallow on these compared to the coins, which are really the native asset of the particular blockchain that they use for fees and such. So, those questions. Very important thing to understand, because when I get into the assets, I'm going to make sure I differentiate between coins and tokens. Next concept I want to talk about are blockchain forks. There's all kinds of different forks. There's soft forks, there's hard forks, there's contentious forks, there's non-contentious forks, there's consensus forks. There's a lot of different ways that a blockchain can fork. And basically what it means is that there's some type of software upgrade on basically like the validators or the nodes for it, and you can go one way or another. You can follow one software set or another, and generally if there's enough people validating on that chain, they can both technically cut. So I know we talk about Ethereum and Bitcoin a lot. There have both been a couple hard forks on both of those blockchains where assets are divided, and I'll get into that a little bit. But generally, I'm not going to get too much into the definitions of what defines a hard fork and a soft fork. And a soft fork is also generally can be considered somewhat contentious, but generally, validator nodes, whether they're upgraded or not upgraded, there's enough of them for both of them. They both continue on their separate ways, and then they validate transactions on those assets differently. So it's a real high-level explanation of Bitcoin forks. It's relevant for the next discussion here. Smart contracts. This is probably one of the more innovative features. A lot of the top digital assets, they are considered smart contract platforms where they're enabled for this. And when you think about smart contracts, what it is, so think about traditional contracts. Let's say you want to have a contract for a mortgage, for example, right? You're buying a house, right? There needs to be escrow involved. There needs to be a middleman. You need to trust that middleman. You need to pay that middleman. You need to sign your life away on a stack of paper that's thick. And you have to wait days for things to clear, wires, etc. So that's like an example of a traditional contract. A smart contract, on the other hand, if you can embed all those rules in code in a blockchain, a centralized blockchain, where you just say, if the conditions are true, then execute this transaction. All of the overhead goes away, right? You go from being able to sell in days to minutes, right? From needing escrow to probably not needing escrow, to paying tons of fees to maybe paying very, very minimal fees, right? Instead of having to be in person or the notary and signing, you just have a wallet, private key, sign, that's a smart contract. Very high level, that's what it is. There's still tons of innovation that's set to happen in this space, but it's good to understand what those are. Next is layer 2 scaling, something I briefly touched on. So layer 2 scaling is a great way to increase the scalability of a particular blockchain, where you can think of it, if everyone knows the concept of zipping file, compressing file, that's an analogy I like to use with this, where you can basically just group together a ton. Generally the blocks are made every 10 minutes on Bitcoin. They're made every, gosh, I forget, 15, 30 seconds or so on Ethereum. It's all different. But like generally those blocks are made no matter what, no matter how much they are. But if you like create a layer 2 solution and kind of like maybe skip a little bit on the security and do it on the back end after the fact and put some penalties in there, create some side chains with a little bit different rules with less volume and such. There are ways that you can get around the scalability issues of very popular platforms like creating these layer 2 set scaling systems, which for the most part has to do with compression, increasing the throughput. Not going to get really deep into the technology there, but it is definitely good to know that they exist. All right, stable coins. So this is a topic that is talked about a lot. It's been talked about actually a lot on the FOMC and banking committees and Senate, etc. Because stable coins, it's a type of crypto that relies on a more stable asset basis for its value. Most commonly, that is the US dollar. Almost every stable coin that I've seen that has a very high market cap, they are pegged or backed some way or another by US dollar. Some of them use different technologies. Some of them use algorithmic mechanics. Some of them actually use assets that are backed by a centralized authority. There's lots of different ways you can have different stable coins. And when we think about crypto assets and liquidity pools and pairing, stable coins provide a ton of value because we all know that digital assets are extremely volatile. And we may want to hold something safe, right? We may want to have some money on the sidelines to buy a dip or something like that, or sell something that's run off, or just again have something that's the equivalent of having money in your checking account, almost, right? Something that's safe but exists in a centralized manner. Lots of different reasons one might want to own stablecoins. There's a lot of different ones out there. And the U.S. government is like, what's with all these billions of dollars of digital dollars that are just like sitting on the internet that we don't have any control over? Like, we need to learn more about this. But in the end, in my personal opinion, stable coins are only going to exert the U.S. dollar dominance globally. We're definitely going to see a lot come out of the space because if you're going to interact with crypto, digital assets, blockchain technologies, having the ability to go in and out of U.S. dollars very quickly and efficiently in a decentralized manner is definitely going to be better and make that work a lot smoother. So I'll get into a little bit about those mechanisms in a bit. All right, so that was all the upfront definitions. I'm going to see if I can find a glass of water or a beer here, because I'm talking a mile a minute. Any questions on any of the technologies or concepts I mentioned so far? This next segment is actually going to dive into around the top 25 digital assets by market cap and a little bit about them. All right, no questions. All right, so this is mostly ordered in terms of highest market cap down. So if you're going to CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, as of March 30th, 2022, which is today, this is a rough order of market cap of the top digital assets. And we will go into it. So first and foremost, no surprise here, is Bitcoin. So this was the original digital asset that started in 2009, founded by a pseudonymous individual entitled Satoshi Nakamoto. It is the largest crypto asset by far in market cap rate. As of today, it's worth about $900 billion. It has definitely reached $1 trillion in time at couple moments. And it uses a proof of work consensus mechanism. It uses the Nakamoto consensus mechanism. Bitcoin is considered a coin. It is one of the three things on this list that we're going to go through today that is considered a commodity by the CFTC. Definitely gives you a little more of a warm, fuzzy feeling when you're owning and trading this, as it already very likely will not be succumb to any securities exchange scrutiny. So if it's already considered a commodity by the CFTC, it's probably somewhat stable of a digital asset, though all digital assets, Bitcoin included, are very volatile. Bitcoin block is mined every 10 minutes. Believe it or not, there's only about 7 transactions that can happen every second on the Bitcoin blockchain. Not a lot for a global medium of exchange. There's a lot of controversy around that in terms of maybe it's better as a store of value versus a medium of exchange. But again, this was the first, and people like to say that the technology and software behind Bitcoin is very pure and shouldn't be modified too much. It has been modified a couple times. We'll get into that a little bit in terms of some hard forks that have branched off of Bitcoin. But as of right now, that are likely forever, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. And I don't know the count, somewhere between 19 and 20 million are in existence today. They will not be mined fully until the year 2140. Thank you. Awesome. And no smart contracts. There's not really any smart contracts, though they've actually this Tablet upgrade. Maybe there's minimal smart contracts that are able there, but there's definitely a layer 2 solution called a Lightning Network, and we'll call it Stack, make it so smart contracts may be available with Bitcoin. So that's the first issue. Again, raise hands anytime you have questions about any of this. Next, Ethereum. So Ethereum debuted in July 2015. It was founded by Vitalik Buterin, Gavin Wood, and quite a few others. It is the second largest crypto asset by market cap, coming in about $405 billion. It currently uses a proof of work consensus mechanism. However, they are moving to, or at least plan to move to proof of stake this year, potentially even the next few months here. Ether is a coin, and that is something that a lot of people know. Everyone thinks that they say they're buying Ethereum. Technically, Ethereum is the blockchain technology. Ether is the underlying asset they're actually buying and owning. So, I don't know if people know that. Everyone just calls it Ethereum, but actually the coin is actually called Ether, but people use them interchangeably. This one is also considered a commodity by the CFTC, so again, that makes it feel a little more safer that it may not come under security scrutiny anytime in the future. Roughly about 15-second block times when compared to Bitcoin's 10-minute block times. Still rough in terms of the transactions per second, about 15 to 30 transactions per second. And when you think about just the massive demand and the size of the ecosystem of Ethereum, it is a super global with blockchain with lots of applications. So there's a concept called gas fees where you have to pay a fee every time, you do a transaction with Ethereum blockchain. And it is rough. It's changed over time, but you can expect to pay probably no less than $5, and I've seen transactions go close to $100 or more on Ethereum every time you do something. Generally, if you're interacting with Ethereum, it is not the best idea to do lots of transactions on it. It becomes extremely expensive. That is why layer 2 scaling and later on ETH 2.0 are going to help us a bit. But just because the block space is just that much in demand for this blockchain, people are willing to pay a premium for interacting with that because, like I said before, this is one of the potentially 2 blockchain technologies that could very likely withstand a nation-state attack. So if you're putting millions or billions of dollars on something, you're probably going to want to go to Ethereum and not much of anything else. So they don't care about paying the 10 or $20 fees. This is by far the top 2 most decentralized blockchains. As of this moment, the beacon chain for ETH2, there's also the validators or the miners for ETH1. But right now, over 300,000 validators, which blows every other blockchain out of the water in terms of how decentralized it is. There's a concept called TVL, which stands for total value locked. The way you think about that is dollar value locked into smart contracts and protocols. And Ethereum is the #1 smart contract platform, #1 blockchain with the highest amount of total value locked as of today and March 30th, 2022. Roughly $130 billion of total value locked on the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum blockchain uses smart contracts via the Ethereum virtual machine, and EVM smart contracts are coded with a language called Solidity, which is very similar to JavaScript. So that's Ethereum, extremely popular, first big smart contract platform. When we talk about coins versus tokens, almost every legitimate token that has a very high value, they're all ERC20 tokens based on Ethereum just because of the following, decentralization, security, etc.
When the gas prices were low about, I don't know, about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, what drove the gas prices down?
So the question was about a month or a month and a half ago, what drove the gas prices down in Ethereum? Because for a very long time, they're very, very high. There were probably a few days there where you could probably get in for some $5 transactions. That actually had, from my understanding, with the NFT craze coming down a little bit. So NFTs are extremely gas intensive in terms of transferring them, minting them, etc. There was a little bit, when things happen in the macro world that made NFTs, the volume not as much. Less transactions on the chain, meaning less demand for miners, for blocks, which lowers the fees of it. So that's my understanding anyway. But generally, there's a lot of things. There's tons of alternative L1s to Ethereum that are being compatible, as well as layer 2 scaling solutions that are probably also taking some of that demand off the Ethereum blockchain. So probably the fees, it depends, right? Because the more that crypto is adopted, the more DeFi is adopted, the more that volume goes up, the more those fees go up, but the more technologies that are created, such as L1s, L2 solutions, etc., then that actually reduces some of that volume from that core layer. I see a world, and not too far from now, maybe a year from now, where there's very little coins and NFTs left on the Ethereum layer 1 blockchain, because Ethereum goes to $10, $20, $30,000, whatever people think it might go to. The fees are going to be so outrageous. You'll want to avoid doing any kind of transactions on there. But I think a lot of those coins, NFTs, as assets, they're very popular. Up to L2s, so that you won't have to interact with Ethereum too much. And as more bridges from exchanges support L2s, that'll help that as well. So good question. Yeah.
Is that the activity in NFP is gone down? Is that because the activity is increasing metaverse?
So the question is the activity of NFTs going down, is that because activity in metaverse has gone up? It depends. It really depends on what solution it is, right? Because there's, not that I know, but almost no metaverse project is executing on the layer 1 blockchain of Ethereum anymore. It can't work there. So all those metaverse plays are generally, a lot of them are L2s or alternative L1s. So I don't think that has taken some of that volume away. It is potential. It's probably a little bit of the creators, the profile pictures dying down a little bit, or less of those projects debuting. Again, we're in a time of macro uncertainty right now. A lot of different things with a hawkish Fed and the conflict in Eastern Europe, right? I don't think people are slinging around lots of disposable income on things like NFTs. So that's my guess, but again, nothing's financial advice. Don't know for sure. It's all on chain. It's definitely verifiable. I will look deeply into it, but I think that's what I heard. Yeah. Yeah, quick explanation on L2s. L2s are layer 2 solutions. This is a very, very important concept for things like Bitcoin and Ethereum that have very low throughput, very low scalability right now, but there's the desire for more demand, and it really is almost like a kind of compression software that's built on top of those solutions, where you can bundle transactions more. There's so many different technologies. It goes into way too much for probably this audience and the time we have today. There are things called zero knowledge proofs, which let you bypass it. If you think about how blockchains work and consensus and validation, there are lots and lots of people verifying transactions anytime you do something. That is extremely time consuming. Consumes a lot of time, consumes a lot of compute power. Lots of people want that. If you can bundle those up on the side basically and execute them later, or make some assumptions that, okay, that's probably not a illegitimate transaction. So we'll let it go through, and if later on we decide that was not a legitimate transaction, they're trying to trick us, we have some of their ether bonded, we're going to slash it to make people not incentivize at all to do any kind of funny business, which basically means you don't have to do as much security. Some other alt L1s, they have turned that dial down a little bit, so that you want to make it so that 99.999% of chance that a transaction will be legitimate and finalized, okay? But if you drop a couple decimal points, it's only 99.999 or whatever, like 6 nines or whatever. Some people can move with 6 nines versus 8 or 9 nines, and that actually can increase the scalability quite a bit by letting some of those potential security issues through at a little bit of a higher chance but still chances that are extremely unlikely, much less than a meteor hitting the Earth or something like that. So there's again very complicated, but layer 2's generally built upon Bitcoin and Ethereum, the most common examples, just because they're just so popular, so busy. And Ethereum being a real big one because Ethereum is a smart contract platform.
Is Ethereum's L2 solution fleshed out now?
So the question was, is Ethereum's L2 fleshed out right now? There are tons of Ethereum L2s. I think there's over 100 of them. And there's tons in development, and they do all kinds of things. Oh gosh, I can name some names. So Polygon's a side change, there's Metis, there's Immutable X, there's Starkware, there's Optimism, there's Arbitrum, right? So there's like a ton of different L2 technologies built on Ethereum that you could use, that you could have coins and NFTs stored on, DeFi protocols, etc. It's up to the developers to build on those L2s. So Arbitrum seems to be a pretty popular one initially. Immutable X for NFT gaming. Someone mentioned metaverse stuff. That is a very popular one for metaverse, and potentially all NFTs might go to Immutable X or similar ones in the future. So there's a ton of them out there, right? And a lot of them are decently fleshed out. Everything is ZK Sync and Starkware and such. There's a lot of really good ones. The applications are already using them. Like DYDX is very popular. Decentralized exchange, I think, is using some of the ZK stuff. So it's extremely complicated, very complicated. It goes very off the deep end here. But that's a high level what layer 2 is. It is very important. We want to keep having things very, to solve that blockchain trilemma. Layer 2s go very long way in solving that. And it's just about getting it out there for people to understand and adopt these layer 2 solutions and treat them as, all right. So, all right, next one we'll go into is Tether. Tether is the largest stablecoin, the first stablecoin pegged to the US dollar. It exists on like a dozen blockchains and mainly just on Ethereum for a really long time. It's Hong Kong based, has very strong ties to Bitfinex. Very important to understand, since its founding in 2014, Tether has been the subject of ongoing controversy due to the failure of Tether to provide audited financial statements, proving that it has adequate reserves backing the USDT coin. So personally, again, not financial advice, all of my stablecoin assets, none of it is Tether. So, but it's the oldest one, it's been around forever, it's the largest market cap. Like I said, it's very rarely gone very deep off its peg. It might be okay. I'm not really chancing it. There's plenty of other great stablecoins out there that you want to get into that I don't know about. So that's Tether. All right, Binance Coin, or the BNB token, is an interesting one. This one debuted in July 2017. It was originally issued as an ERC20 token on Ethereum, but actually moved to the Binance chain, the Binance Smart Chain, in April 2019. The Binance Smart Chain is EVM compatible, mentioned Ethereum virtual machine. It uses a proof of authority consensus mechanism, which basically is very similar to proof of stake, but it's very, very centralized. The Binance organization knows who those validators are and gives them a lot of power so that it makes this way more scalable. So you can see that the block time is only 35 seconds and they can execute about 150 transactions per second. It is very centralized. There are only 21 validators and they're mostly owned by Binance and made it very, very big companies. So it's pretty centralized, but it has the third largest total value locked in DeFi with $13 billion. Binance is the largest exchange in the world. One very interesting thing to note, BNB price action, Binance fees a portion of them for at least the next couple of years for a certain percentage of BNB coins. I don't remember what it is exactly, but they do take a portion of their trading fees from their exchange and they buy back the BNB coin and burn it, which basically helps make this somewhat of a deflationary asset, at least in the short term. So people get excited about that, and it's so high. Again, also the biggest exchange in the world. USD coin. This is one of those, in my personal opinion, again, not financial advice, better alternatives to Tether. This is managed by a consortium called Center, which includes its founder Circle as well as Coinbase and Bitmain. Fifth largest crypto asset by market cap. It is a coin pegged to the US dollar. Considered the safest one, likely the reserves are actually backed, audited. They're based in Massachusetts, in the good old US. And actually, their CEO testified in some recent Senate and FOMC hearings, and I think was received very favorably, in my own opinion, because they are taking US dollar assets. They are making the US dollar more scarce and making it a stronger asset by minting these. And I think the US government fix that. So if you're going to hold a stable coin, that's also available on a lot of different blockchains. Probably one of the better ones to own. Again, no financial advice.
So there are, yeah, not financial, like, but one of the other things is on some of these I guess, exchanges like Voyager, you get a 9% APY if you spend for every $100. Better than your return. Yeah, USDC.
Yeah.
Better than your return.
Yeah, so this is a really great point. So with the question or comment that was just brought up was that there are some centralized exchanges that offer fairly attractive yields on stablecoins, and that is definitely true, right? There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of concepts like such as rate quantification that goes deeply into it, but there are things that people could do with stablecoins that banks are doing and just not sharing as much with you in your checking account is one of the wonderful things about crypto and going bankless and decentralized finance. But just note that stablecoins aren't 100% risk-free, right? There is the chance that you could lose your backing. There's smart contract risk that's not FDIC insured. Like, it feels safe. Like, I feel pretty safe holding USDC. I don't think anything's going to happen with it. I feel like I'll always be able to redeem it. And so if you want to hold USDC and get 8 to 12% or whatever on an exchange relatively safely, potentially, go right ahead. I definitely do it. But yeah, it's definitely an alternative. But just know that there's no such thing really as a risk-free 8+% yield. There's some risk in there. That's probably what I don't know. Good point. Good point. All right. Next one, I'm not going to spend too much time here on Ripple. Some people don't even like to classify it as a digital asset or crypto because it doesn't use a blockchain. It uses something called the Ripple protocol consensus algorithm. It has a ton of throughput, 1,500 transactions per second. It is pretty centralized, so about 150 validators for it, but it is the center of a pretty massive public controversy in which the SEC sued Ripple for selling XRP tokens, and they felt that those were considered unregistered securities. So I don't own any Ripple, I don't know a lot about it, but it has a $41 billion market cap, mainly because I think they built a lot of relationships with banks as potentially being one of the big cryptos to bring into the banking scene. Maybe there's potential there, maybe not, but the SEC tries to put a clause into it, there's a risk there. That's Ripple. Next one, Cardano. So Cardano, they debuted in September 2017. This was founded by Charles Hoskinson, the company he helped create called the IOHK. He was originally part of the crew that was starting to build Ethereum and branched off shortly after. It is the 7th largest crypto asset by market cap at $38 billion. ADA is a coin, not a token. It does use the proof of stake consensus mechanism that it's called Ouroboros, which makes it, of course, as we mentioned, faster and more energy efficient. Can get roughly about 250 transactions per second. Quite a lot of validators, 3,000. Only $300 million total value lock, which is not a lot when you think about the $130 billion that Ethereum has. They do use smart contracts. They use a Haskell programming language, and I think sometime this year they will support the EVM smart contract. So lots of things people could say about this one. It is of course very popular since it's the 7th largest one, but they still need to get a lot of adoption in terms of programmers. This is probably one of the more fascinating ones in recent history, especially this week. This one is called Terra and the Luna coin. So this was founded by Do Kwon in South Korea. It's the 8th largest crypto asset by market cap at $38 billion. Luna is a coin on Terra blockchain, which is based on the Cosmos ecosystem, which is a blockchain technology that is a very, very solid project. It uses a delegated proof of stake consensus mechanism. They can boast roughly 10,000 transactions per second, a lot of the Cosmos-based ones can. Somewhat centralized with 130 validators, but it is the 2nd highest total value locked blockchain, right, at $29 billion. They use smart contracts that code in Rust as opposed to Solidity, though it feels very much like Solidity. And probably the reason why they are so popular is because of something called the Mirror Protocol. It is a decentralized application that boasts a lofty 19% APR that up until this day has been stable, it has been working, it's been maintaining its peg well for a while. I think any investor would drop what they're doing if they feel they get a safe 19% APR. There's still a question as to how exactly safe that is, but I'm going to dive a little bit into that. But the biggest reason, and in terms of, you might have noticed this week, crypto assets are pumping quite a lot, right? So there's been a lot since last week. Bitcoin, when Bitcoin generally goes up, everything else follows, right? And a big reason of that is because the Terra Foundation, with the Luna Foundation Guard, LFG, they have said that they're going to start not only having the mechanism that creates the UST stablecoin off of Luna Coin, but they're also going to start backing the Luna Coin in case there is extreme volatile situations in the future with Bitcoin reserves, and they're buying lots and lots of Bitcoin to help with the backing of Luna should there be any concern about it in the future. This is probably the reason why there's is partially the reason why Bitcoin, extremely interesting project. To go a little bit deeper into it, I moved this around a little bit. Of UST, the 14th largest crypto asset, $16.3 billion, is a decentralized stablecoin, right? So it's not like Tether and USDC because it's backed in a very different way. The peg is maintained in a very different way. It uses algorithms to maintain that. And how it does that is via this arbitrage behavior with the Luna token itself, where if the peg of UST goes above $1 certain amounts, then they can sell UST on the open market and just take that profit of whatever it is. And then if UST falls below the peg, like say it's 99 or 98 cents, then you have the ability to take Luna tokens and get a premium on them to make up that difference. So you could sell Luna for more than what it's worth and turn that into UST tokens. And assuming you have trust in this system, because again, this is like it's a little I don't want to say sketchy, but you have to be careful because if everybody loses faith in this, that's not going to work. If everyone just says, yeah, I'm not going to buy with the tokens, I don't trust this working. Who knows? It has done a very good job maintaining its peg. And again, them buying the Bitcoin reserves helps maintain that even more. So look at Mirror Protocol, 90% yields. Like it is a very interesting play, very, very popular. But if anyone is telling you that they're getting a 19% yield on something and there's zero risk with it, they're very likely misleading you. So there is some risk here. I don't know how much risk, but it is a very, very interesting play and it is getting a lot of institutional adoption. So if hedge funds and folks think that it's worth putting billions of dollars on,
I'm just trying to understand the staking game. Why would you mention like 9% or 6% or something? So to make the math easy, if you had say 100 bitcoins and you were getting someplace for staking for 6%, you would get paid in bitcoins, right? So as bitcoins are volatile, you can't really look at it as a 6% investment, right? You're looking at. So is that how all staking works? It's the percentage of coin?
So the question was that you have a digital asset that you can basically loan for a yield, and you're getting more of that same token. So in the example of Bitcoin is very volatile assets. They fluctuate a lot. So if you're getting 6% more Bitcoin a year by holding Bitcoin, if Bitcoin drops more than 6%, then yeah, you're not doing better than you did by holding US dollars. But I think what she was mentioning was specifically about stablecoins. So the USDC, Tether, UST, right?
And then one other question on market cap, what confuses me is we're going to see some whale burn all these coins, a smart contract. So how are we supposed to look at market cap? Do you have to look at like that particular coin and realize how many could be released, minted in the future?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. So to repeat the question, it has to do with kind of the supply schedules of digital assets. Like some of them are hard capped in the amount of tokens that they have, and some of them are capped up to Bitcoin to 1 million. So they're uncapped. They can create tokens infinitely, right? And some of them pay very close attention to. They have a total cap, but they only release like 10% of them. There's a schedule. They release those at certain intervals. So when you analyze digital assets, and they're going to call that inflation, a lot of these things, they're backed by venture capital, like they have unlocking schedules. So when you think about things like both staking rewards for a lot of these assets, plus venture capital locks, a lot of these tokens that I'm going into actually coming up here, they probably have somewhat high inflation of 10, 15, 20% per year, which means that there needs to be a lot of buy pressure for that to maintain its price. And if it doesn't have that buy pressure, if you're not staking it yourself, then it's a tough thing to hold, right? So those are definitely things you gotta look at when you're assessing those things. In terms of market cap, there are lots of mechanisms in game theory for what different projects do in terms of things called reflections or burning. Because when you make assets deflationary, you make them more scarce, assuming nothing else changes with demand, the value generally goes up. Gotta be careful with those. So in this realm of crypto, there's lots of things that are very Ponzi and pyramid-y feeling in terms of how they work, where if you're the last one in there holding the back, you will get wrecked. And if you get in early, you might do well, but if there's no volume, no one does well. And so it's just, you gotta be really careful. And again, no financial advice, invest in whatever you want. Don't people get crazy rich off things like these, but ethically, I generally look at things that have a technology and use case behind them that's sustainable, like Ethereum and other things. But yeah, you don't have to make any tokens and make it sound like you could make $1 million off of it. But it is a zero-sum game, right? For every $1 million some person makes, someone else is losing $1 million in a lot of these digital assets. So be extremely careful.
Excuse me.
Yep.
You just said reflection. Can you explain what that is?
So the question about reflections. So reflections is I don't want to go too deeply into it because it's again considered it's just a little sketchy pyramid way of crypto assets. Well, some assets, like the most popular one, and I don't want to give it too much attention, is called SafeMoon, where every time you buy or sell it, there's a 10% fee you have to pay. 5% of it gets burnt, 5% is reflected to all the current holders. So assuming demand stays the same or in constant and up, if you're in there earlier, generally you might be able to make money off of that. But again, be really careful, right? A lot of these things, they don't have real good technology use cases behind them. They're very pyramid-y in nature, pyramid schemes. Then look at, what's it called? Amway, right? They've been around for decades, they are doing great. So, I don't know. But BitConnect's not around anymore. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anything that makes it sound like you're gonna get rich really quickly, you're probably not.
If you go back to the Bitcoin started, since up to this day, every April of May is when everything goes up, June, July crash. All the graphs match up perfectly.
Right, I know.
It'll crash probably in June.
We'll see. All right, next digital asset, Solana. This is one that has exploded in recent time. Founded by Anatoly Yakovenko. It is the 9th largest crypto asset, $37 billion. It is a coin. Mainly uses proof of stake. There's a twist on it called proof of history, which is why they were able to boast a pretty large throughput in here. 400 millisecond block times, very quick. 65,000 transactions per second, also extremely quick. Decent amount of validators, over 1,000 of them. 5th largest total value locked, 7.5 billion. They have smart contracts. They are not EVM compatible, so all that code that's been battle tested on Ethereum, you cannot simply port over to here. You do have to transfer it to Rust and other languages, so that does institute some smart contract risk. It is definitely still in beta, and there have been many outages over the last year in Solana. Some of them have been extensive to a day or so, where nobody can transact on the Solana blockchain. But it's a very interesting project. Avalanche is another one. This one came out in September 2020. AVAX, also a coin. There's 3 different chains. I'm not going to get into all of them, but their C chain is EVM compatible. It uses proof of stake consensus mechanism. It's got some decent technology behind it. 3-second block times. They boast somewhere around 1,500 validators. The 4th highest total value locked, over $10 billion. One thing to be very, very careful with this, I have analyzed all these things quite deeply. The inflation of VC unlocks and staking rewards is very high on this. It's over 30% annually. So if you're just buying AVAX and holding it, you better always lock in buying it, because otherwise it's not good time. But it's been doing really well, so it's got a lot of tech behind it. Polkadot, so this one's a very interesting one, 11th largest one, founded by Gavin Wood, who we mentioned before was a co-founder of Ethereum. He likes to envision the layer 0 world. It uses the proof of stake consensus mechanism called B, whatever it stands for. 6-second block times, 300 validators, about 166 TPS. 11th highest total volume locked. Polkadot provides interconnectivity and interoperability between blockchains by enabling independent chains to securely exchange messages and perform transactions with each other without a trusted third party. So they like to link blockchains together. And the last year they had their parachain auctions. So it's still really, really early. This clearly wouldn't be the 11th largest one if there wasn't a lot of hype around it. 24 billion is quite a lot. I'm currently staking this. It's interesting play. Who knows if they'll, if they'll execute, but if, blockchain crypto keeps growing as fast as it seems to be, having a solution like this, who knows, could be very valuable. You have cross-chain dApps that have a lot less risk than our. Here's a very fun one called Dogecoin, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of. This might have been people's first foray. Some people would like to consider this like a gateway drug into crypto. So, and I'm not talking down Dogecoin. I love that it exists, and I think that's a really cool concept. So it debuted a long time ago, actually, December 2013. 12th largest crypto asset for market cap at $18.7 billion. Believe it or not, Doge is a coin. It is not a token. It actually has its own blockchain. And we make fun of it a little bit because it's a fork of a fork of a fork of a fork. Dogecoin was forked from Lucky Coin, which doesn't exist anymore, which was forked from Litecoin, which was somewhat software forked from Bitcoin. So it has a kind of a long, interesting history. It uses a consensus mechanism based on script, which means it's not quite using Bitcoin's consensus, so therefore you can't use the ASIC chips to mine it efficiently. 60-second block time, security-free TPS. One of the advisors of Dogecoin includes Jared Virtual, who represents Elon Musk, and Tal Buterin is also on the Dogecoin advisory board. And this is one of the first and largest, quote, meme coins, which Elon Musk has taken a keen interest in, and you can buy some Tesla merchandise with Dogecoin if you'd like. So it's fun and it's out there, but be careful. All right, next one, Binance USD. This is another stable coin. Not gonna spend too much time on it. Joint venture between Paxos and Binance. They are audited. They seem like it's relatively safe. BUSD. Shiba Inu, here's another meme coin that kind of really reinvigorated the explosion of blockchain and crypto last year because it made so much news as wallets out there making bajillions of dollars over here. So this is the 15th largest crypto asset market cap, almost $15 billion. This one, you'll notice, the first one on this list basically, that's not a stable coin. It is a token, it is not a coin, right? So that means somebody out there or some group of people out there, they created these coins, right? It is considered Dogecoin's main competitor in the meme coin space. Be aware of the utility of it. If you want to learn about it, they have a website, shibatoken.com. Somewhat of an interesting backstory, which involves half of the tokens being sent to Tal Buterin, so like his wallet, and he had to go through a bunch of hoops to deal with it. And he ended up donating like 20% of it to a COVID India relief fund and burnt the rest. Just a very interesting backstory, and crazy how much it has caught on, and how much of a common household name it is becoming in the crypto space. Next one is wrapped Bitcoin, which is interesting. So this is 16th largest, $13 billion. This is also a token, but what it is, it's actually custodied Bitcoin, the BitGo exchange. What they do is they have some Bitcoin on hand, they hold it for you, they manage the private keys, and they'll give you WBTC tokens in exchange for it. And since Bitcoin doesn't really have smart contracts, Ethereum has tons of them. If you think that Bitcoin is a better or safer asset than Ethereum, you want to do some fancy DeFi stuff with it, like loaning it out, providing liquidity, etc. Wrapped Bitcoin is a way you can do that. But just know that there is absolutely third-party risk. One of the great things about crypto is that it is mostly trustless. But here you are absolutely trusting that BitGo is going to responsibly manage those private keys and everything. And if they don't, or if they get hacked, these things happen, they may not be able to redeem that WBTC, but they have an insurance policy, it's worth like $100 million or whatever, so no issues yet, but just be aware that whenever you're trusting a third party, that adds a layer of risk. But it's kind of fun to be able to use Bitcoin and DeFi, so it's there. Kronos, this is the first of many that's in the top 100 assets considered an exchange token. So BNB was a good one that I had mentioned before. CRO token, very interesting, gives you a lot of perks in the Crypto.com app. If you haven't heard of Crypto.com, you've probably been living under a rock because they advertise like crazy. They have Super Bowl, and Formula One, and they have the Staples Center, and now the Crypto.com Center for basketball. They're absolutely everywhere. They're based in Singapore. Believe it or not, 10th highest total value locked in the Kronos blockchain. Also based on Cosmos. We've got fancy tech there. But CRO tokens, full disclosure, I do own some. I do have a Crypto.com card. I think I need to get my Spotify and Netflix and stuff paid for to sell these tokens. And the yields are high in stable coins and stuff. So interesting play, but probably volatile. Polygon, previously known as Matic. This is one of the first. So it's tough to call it a layer 2. It's much easier to call it a sidechain to Ethereum. Matic is a coin. Polygon is an EVM compatible sidechain to Ethereum. Uses some technologies, I forget, like the plasma bridge and POS chain. Uses proof of stake, 1 second block times. They boast over 7,000 TPS. I haven't been able to see that, but that's what they say. Only 100 validators, 9th highest total value blocked. I do a lot of Polygon actually, because EVM compatible is really cheap compared to Ethereum, one of the older ones. So that's Polygon. We have lots and lots of partnerships with a lot of companies like DraftKings and stuff are doing lots of things. So there could be a lot of momentum here. This is a really fun, interesting one. I love that I've heard of this. This is Lido Staked Ether, STE. 19th largest crypto asset with market cap, almost $10 billion. It is an ERC20 token, similar to how Wrapped Bitcoin worked. It's just a concept called liquid staking. So, say you have a Coinbase account, you have the ability to stake your ETH in the Beacon chain for the Ethereum 2.0 version. And if you stake it, you cannot touch it until ETH 2.0 launches, right? And that's been over a year at this point. So people don't always like to stake something and not go touch it for a very long amount of time. The concept of liquid staking answers this, and Lido along with Rocket Pool, they're probably the two most popular examples of people offering a service where they are a centralized authority. They will take your ETH, they will stake it for you, they'll give you a receipt called STE that you can give them any time, and they'll give you the rewards, ETH rewards from the validator that you've gotten, so that you can move STE much easier. Their goal is basically that they want to be the reserve currency of Ethereum, and so they say, why hold ETH when you could just hold staked ETH and it'd be worth more at the end of the day, because it'll be worth 5 to 6 or 7 or 10% more a year, which is true, again, except that there is, since you're trusting a centralized party, that will add a layer of risk into it, but pretty neat to have that as an option. Near protocol, I don't know a whole lot about it, but when I researched it, it's been very interesting. We actually are a blockchain that already uses a concept called sharding, which is something in the ETH 2.0 roadmap that's going to make it much more scalable, and it has limited sharding in it. They just created the Rainbow Bridge, which bridges Ethereum assets to and from near EVM compatible chain. This has been growing very fast, so it's piqued my interest. I don't know a lot about it, but it is clearly rising up the charts as I say 20th largest crypto asset by market cap. So here's a fun one. I put 2 in one slide here. This is DAI and MakerDAO, so the DAI token and MKR. So DAI debuted in 2019, which was created by the MakerDAO. DAI is the 21st largest crypto asset by market cap, almost $10 billion, and Maker, 66th largest crypto asset, about $2 billion. And DAI is a decentralized ERC20 stablecoin pegged to the US dollar. It does this through collateralized loans. Maker was probably one of the first. Maker, along with Compound and Bancor and there's Uniswap, like these were like the real first visionaries of DeFi and exploring the potentials of what you could do with Ethereum and crypto technology. So MakerDAO, very, very cool. A lot of kind of somewhat forks of Maker, like Abracadabra money and Mint token and such that are trying to do this as well. Now that the code is out there, you know, people trust you to collateralize the assets with you. They can pay stable coins. They're decentralized, very interesting concept. Litecoin, which originally back in the day, 2011, this was founded. This is not like you only ever heard of Bitcoin if you're in Litecoin back in the day. But this one has fallen quite by the wayside in terms of market cap. 22nd largest crypto asset, $90 billion. Everyone likes to use the analogy of Litecoin. That Bitcoin is like digital gold, and Litecoin is like digital silver. Use the same initial source code as Bitcoin forked, but they changed the consensus mechanism to something called script, which is just a little bit different. It is actually also considered a commodity, one of the only 3 that I know of anyway that are considered commodities by the CFTC. A little bit faster, I think that's 4 times the total supply. It's a little bit of a twist on Bitcoin. The 22nd bar, did I copy it? Oh my goodness, 900 million. Typo, thank you.
I was wondering
Good
about
catch.
that.
Sorry about that. Yes. My bad. It's only 3 decimal points. I am so sorry about that. That is a typo. I do this very fast. but no, it's $900 billion, I'm pretty sure. So maybe actually, maybe it's 9 billion actually.
Only because
You know what?
a year ago,
It's
somebody
9 billion.
recommended Litecoin to me and I bought some, all of a sudden like, whoa!
Yeah, sorry, you're not rich. Sorry, you bought like Litecoin and think that the market of $900 billion. Sorry, you're not rich. It's I see the typo as $9 billion. Not bad. It is very fast. I knew there was going to be at least one or two typos in there. Good catch. All right, next one is Cosmos Hub, the Atom token. I already mentioned some things. Terra, as well as Chronos. They use the Cosmos blockchain technology. Very interesting product. This one intrigues me second most to Ethereum. They have about $377,000. Very, very fast. It's not yet EVM compatible. It will be extremely soon. So that could be very interesting if we see a lot of more bridging and dApps on Cosmos. Chainlink. This is a very fun one. I'm very interested in this one. This is an ERC 677 token, which is similar enough to so of course, tokens, be careful. It is based on the Ethereum blockchain. It is not a coin. But the use cases for it are astounding. Chainlink is by far the most used Oracle crypto applications. I think over 85% of dApps that need oracles use Chainlink. So Chainlink is a framework for building decentralized Oracle networks that bring real-world data onto blockchain networks and the creation of hybrid smart contracts. And these provide decentralized services such as price feeds, web APIs, weather data. You can create smart contracts that do things like when the weather changes or the price of assets change, etc. It's used for a lot of fees, staking, etc. Very interesting play. So I'm taking way too much time. I feel really bad when Justice has something that he wants to cover here. I think my last two is just, I won't go deep into them, Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum Classic. These are two examples of hard forks that have happened on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Very interesting history, right, between the block wars, which is a part of history of Bitcoin. People were thinking that should be more scalable, but the 7 TPS was hindering Bitcoin's adoption, and if there was a big hard fork, contentious hard fork there, Bitcoin Cash was born of that, and that created another one called BSV, and another one recently. So that's a hard fork, but it is not the original one. And Ethereum Classic, some might argue it is the original, but it is there was a hard fork of Ethereum back in the day as a result of something called the DAO hack. It was just way too huge of a hack. 5% of all Ethereum was basically hacked and stolen, and people got together and said the really only ethical way they could really roll it back was by doing a hard fork. So the Ethereum that we use today and love is a hard fork of the original Ethereum. A lot of purists said, hey, we should never roll back or touch the code. Who cares? Someone got hacked. We should maintain the sovereignty and not mess around with the core code of Ethereum. And so Ethereum Classic stayed on as a potential crypto asset. Still has lots of validators as well, or a lot of the same code as Ethereum. Clearly, it's nowhere near as popular as Ethereum, as it has a very small fraction of the market cap. So people have been following the non-hacked version of Ethereum much closer. So be careful about those. I'm not going to say the original is best and most followed is best. So that's those two. So I'm done with my section. I know that was quite a lot to go through. Sorry if it took too much time. We still have plenty of time for more exciting things. I think so too. It is. Maybe not. Maybe it's not good. Anyway, so thanks for that. Justice?
If I just talk loud, will it pick up the audio here? Or is it feeding through this?
No, it'll pick it up.
Oh, nice. I can talk about it. Okay. Greg is a smart guy. He knows so much stuff. I've been on the scene for a little bit and just going through all this. Wow, I didn't even know that. So, to mix things up a little bit, and I won't hold you too long. I'm going to give you guys more time to get some more food, hang out, talk to each other. I wanted to talk about privacy. Okay? We want the advantages of blockchain, but it's not real comfy wearing a shirt that says every single transaction you do on everything. Imagine you walk around and there's a readout following you everywhere, how much you spend on coffee, what subscriptions you pay for, everywhere you go. Effectively, the way the blockchain works right now is it's 100% transparent. That's what it is. When you see someone's .eth, No joke. Go online, type in their .eth, go to Etherscan. You see right here, you will see every transaction they have ever done since the beginning of time. Okay, that's the transparency, right? Raise your hand if you have heard of Etherscan. Okay, cool. So what I want to do is talk about just a couple slides, maybe like 5, and about how you can, I think this is dead, I don't hear one. Basically what you can do now to get all the advantages of crypto, but actually bring on some privacy to your operations, okay? First up, Tornado Cash. Raise your hand if you heard of Tornado Cash. Okay, Tornado Cash gets a bad reputation because here's the deal. And I'm going to speak my opinion up here. There's people out there that believe it's their God-given right and moral authority on everything you do everywhere, okay? There's another group of people, in fact, the people who invented Bitcoin and this whole movement called the cypherpunks, that said unless we build the tools for self-sovereignty and defend ourselves from what's coming, we will all slide into a digital totalitarianism, where what you say, think, and spend, every aspect of your life will be controlled, and we have to build almost an arms race to prevent that from happening. That was the cypherpunks. They're the ones that came and put forth in their pseudo-anonymous identity, Satoshi Nakamoto, and made all this possible, okay? So that's the mindset behind products like Tornado Cash. Now, we can't do this tonight because tonight is the first time we're actually recording this session. In the future, my preference is to do these crazy demos with you guys. And for some of you who've been in the previous meetings, you'll know. I walk in, share my screen, log in with my wallet, and do it right in front of you with real money, okay? We will continue that pattern in the future, not tonight, when we get a better camera system set up so my eyeball isn't even in the camera as I'm doing this. But fundamentally, the way Tornado Cash works is you go to Tornado Cash, the website. Here's how it works. You make a deposit from your wallet. You get a password back. You wait some time. At any time you come back later, put that password in, it spits that money back out in that alternative wallet. Why is that important? Because now on Etherscan, there's not a direct link between these two wallets. Basically what it shows is there's a smart contract, some amount of money came in from thousands of people, and at some point in the future it came out. Maybe you put in 1,000, and then a week later 1,000 accounts each got $1. There's no provable way to connect this. What's unique about this among all the different ones we're going to look at is this is operating on the Ethereum blockchain, and it is an L1 solution. That's what, once you do the transaction, game over, you did what you did, okay? Now we introduce some more interesting, sophisticated tools. Okay, ZK Money. On Tornado Cash, let's say you pay $100, $200 on the gas fee. Once you do the transaction, game over, that was fun. ZK Money is like an L2 version of Tornado Cash. The idea with ZK Money is you go on here, you create a special wallet. You deposit money into that. Now, you can send that money to any other account that has been made on ZK Money, and it is obfuscated and hidden the transaction between those endpoints, okay? If you send it to a wallet address that doesn't have a ZK Money account, it'll just go to their wallet address like you'd normally expect. The cool part about that, whereas on Tornado Cash, you need to spend $100, $200 for whatever to happen, here's a few bucks. And then the game just keeps going. The example they like to use is you have a city, you walk into the city, this is Privacy City, man. The economics, you know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the ZK Money world stays there. Okay, you can go on from there. Okay, that's next up. All right, now we have a slightly different approach to privacy. Thorchain. Thorchain is not necessarily designed with privacy in mind, but follow me on this. This is a cross-chain self-custody technology. Okay? Now we looked at all these different chains. Many different. Bitcoin is not compatible with the Ethereum blockchain. Thorchain allows you to do what we're used to doing on centralized exchanges. I can go on Coinbase, Binance, or whatever right now and swap Bitcoin for Ether. Technically, they're doing stuff behind the scenes to make that possible. Thorchain is self-custody. There is no central trader. And they've just done some cryptographic magic underneath to make this possible. Now I got one picture that paints a picture of how wild this is. Does anyone recognize this screen on the left? That's it, okay. Now, notice the difference, okay? I'm swapping USDC for what?
Grab Bitcoin.
Grab Bitcoin. Why am I not getting Bitcoin?
Because
Yeah. Uniswap is Ethereum, decentralized exchange. So in order for me to get to, really the best I could get is an ERC20 token that's pegged to the price of Bitcoin, hence the wrapped. Okay, now you guys see the picture on the right?
Yeah.
You see a difference here? I'm trading 100 USDC for what?
Bitcoin.
BTC native. Now you will notice the difference in fees. What's the fees over here? 30 bucks. What's the fees here? 67. Okay, now obviously there's a million factors that'll drive what those gas fees are, right? But so not only have we seen, okay, Tornado Cash, L1 privacy ability, we have ZK Money, L2 privacy city, okay? Now we have full cross-chain self-custody ability.
Was it able to do that before Omi went to ERC?
What's that?
Was it able to do that before Omi went to Comey, sorry, was on, I think it was a GC.
I don't know.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
so now we got the cross-chain, okay? Next up, we have Haven Protocol. And now, probably got one more slide after this. So you get easy and simple, right? What's interesting about Haven Protocol is we're back again. Haven Protocol is an alternative L1. It's built on the Monero, which is a privacy token, privacy coin. But what it does is it says it's one thing to have a token that has the fluctuations up and down, but what we really want is privacy stables. That's what Haven Protocol makes possible. Similar to MakerDAO, where you go in and can deposit ETH and mint DAI, a stable coin. In a similar way, you can come in with a privacy token, deposit it, and mint these stable assets. And so you don't have exposure to that volatility, and you have the anonymity, okay? Are you ready for the next one? This next one's great. This just happened, okay? We got a date on this. Okay, March 9th. Haven Protocol set out to accomplish the impossible of integrating the Haven Protocol with the Thorchain. So we have privacy token that enables private stable coins that you can trade cross-chain, okay? And this pull request to make this possible happened earlier in the month, okay? So when you bring all these things together, there's options to have some privacy to your transactions and not be advertising your Chase activity on a billboard every time you do something. So between the pseudo anonymity about different wallets and these tools, these introduce some more options. Okay.
Just for clarity, I just want to make sure I understand. So my address from Trust Wallet or whatever, assume I'm using Trust Wallet or my address for every transaction I do, and it's out there on every scan. If I'm using a protocol or Thorchain, that address is gone.
You wouldn't say the address is gone, but the linkage between those two addresses is broken. It's obscured by some smart contract that has a bunch of stuff coming in and a bunch of stuff coming out. Or something going into some smart contract and then something else coming out of another smart contract on another chain. Okay?
Would I have to have, would I still have to use MetaMask?
unless this payment protocol or payment protocol takes the place of that. And I no longer need Trust Wallet for that.
There is a dedicated wallet for Haven Protocol because Haven Protocol is its own L1. It's just like Monero, okay? And so all these things work together to provide some variety. For instance, in my test swap I wanted to do, we could do this in a future session, with the Bitcoin, it actually said we need a Bitcoin output address for this swap. So there's a few pieces you have to tie together there to make it happen, which frankly, I was in a position where I needed to pay an engineer, and he said, hey, I want Bitcoin. I said, no, I don't want Bitcoin, dude. Let me just send you some Ether, some Ethereum, He's like, no, I want Bitcoin. I'm like, okay. Or I think he wanted even some Binance-based stablecoin. I said, oh, anything on Binance? You're making this right for me or whatever. And then in preparation for this, I said, this would have been perfect. I would have basically asked for his Bitcoin address, basically used Thorchain, make it happen. Now here's the cool part, right? This is the protocol, multiple wallets are built on top of it. Probably the most accessible wallet where you can get this self-custody, cross-chain trades is Shapeshift. And Shapeshift is not a small player. Shapeshift is probably the most sophisticated, forward-thinking DAO in existence right now. With Gitcoin, Bankless, Shapeshift, and like Index Co-op, like these are some big ones, right? But Shapeshift is up there, and their claim to fame right now is self-custody, cross-chain swaps built on Thorchain.
How do you know that came from you? So the person you're paying, how do they know it came from you?
They don't know, because I told them in a Discord chat.
So if you're collecting, or I'm collecting 10 different payments, I'm just hoping 10 different payments come through. But if you say, no, I sent it to you.
Checks in the mail, yeah, right.
well, here's,
I think I've known about these like privacy ways of transacting for a while, and my big holdup with it is the fact that a lot of my crypto activity, I do actually have to offer it at some time in order to be able to pay for stuff in the real world. And my impression is that the offerings, the centralized exchanges that will exchange fiat currency for crypto, I don't think they're doing it yet, but I think that there is regulatory pressure in the near future to blacklist wallets that use these sorts of privacy-enabled swapping mechanisms. That's my big holdup. It's like I don't want my wallet to be blacklisted so that I can never take money out.
it's a good point. Okay, what does this look like? The government and the nation states aren't just going to be caught sucking their thumb with their pants down. They're going to go through extreme measures to actually provide some traceable provenance on this. And if it's very clear that you have assets coming. But then again, once again, it comes back to the arms race, right? Like, you can buy some NFTs from yourself, but it's all freaking hollow mirrors,
To that point though, unless I give you my wallet address and Trust Wallet, you don't know it's my wallet, right? So even with privacy thing, like he's talking about off-ramps for the exchange, they don't know that that wallet is my wallet.
Yes. So for instance, whether I get a transaction through some privacy mechanism and then tried to send it to an off-ramp, Coinbase, and then tried to spend it from my Coinbase card, you don't know it's that, if that's the reality, or I then paid someone for services and then they send it to their Coinbase wallet for the on-ramp. So you get...
Well, I know like Coinbase wallet's a KYC, but like Trust Wallet's not a KYC. It doesn't have my name, I don't do MetaMask and stuff like that. So technically that's still kind of privacy. I mean, even though it shows transactions, your name's not attached to that, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
Like anybody can get you sent money
Yeah, but they don't know my name is attached.
How do they know my name?
All the transactions. Yeah.
That's like the definition of pseudo.
Yeah.
It's building a brand new identity that isn't linked to anything yet. If it ever did get linked to your centralized account or something like that, then there would be a traceable link that would be anonymous.
A good example I like to use when people are like, is this anonymous or not anonymous? Basically, if you could just click one button and create new email addresses, and they were just hashes. And it was like, look, I just made 100. And exchange information all through that. You know? Okay, so on this anonymity side, lastly, I just want to recommend Chris Black on Twitter. Basically, I call him the gadfly of decentralization, okay? Because he's an extremely rough individual. He will smoke you. If you're blowing smoke on stuff, he will nuke you. But here's the deal. He does this because he believes in the true mission of the cypherpunks and all of what this technology is meant to allow. And so hand-waving on decentralization and privacy when there's no substance to it, his job is to call that out. And so he's the loudest voice, and you will literally find him on this small subset of privacy-oriented technology, and he'll be like the first commenter, doing the call out. He's the biggest call out, a critic of Polygon. Because Polygon, when you boil it all down, is basically just a handful of signatures on a multi-sig, basically control the entire network. And we can be like, all good, it'll be good. Everyone's using it, just like infinite money, total value locked, we're covered. No, he calls it out. So I highly encourage you to follow him. And so that's my little plug on the decentralized stuff. Next time around, we'll figure out how to do the actual swaps in front of you guys, because that's impactful. And it feels nice to see like someone click a button and do the thing. Any final questions, comments? Okay, cool. Okay.
I'm really new to all this. When I looked at the central banks, and then a couple of years ago, I was thinking privacy. And then I think the government picked up Coinbase and other exchanges saying, hey, we want to get trade information, names, security.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it seems like this private world we're in is starting to shift back closer to a central bank.
Yes.
Because now you got Coinbase and transactions and reporting it to the IRS, and So what's your kind of take on that?
If we want this ecosystem to thrive and for there to be innovation in this ecosystem, there needs to be some level of know your customer, because end of the day, nobody should be laundering money and everyone should be paying their taxes, right? And people are using mechanisms to try to evade those things. That's not a good thing, right? So if these mechanisms make you do that way too conveniently, then they could be succumb to regulation. So by having a certain level of KYC, like in the exchanges, right? Like in the US, like you sign up to any exchange, you need to sign in your socialist, your driver's license, they need everything about you. And they see your wallet, they see which wallets you're interacting with. Again, it's all about making sure we're not laundering money, paying your taxes. Do those two things, have fun. But there are definitely, in terms of what our rights are as people, freedom of speech and stuff like that. Some people definitely like to have that the self-custody and anonymity. So there's benefits to it as well, but we just got to make sure that we're playing by the rules, and that again, we want crypto to be a legitimized sector. There needs to be certain layers of that.
To piggyback on that, I'd ask everyone to consider the impact of iTunes on the free flow of digital media. What Steve Jobs did with iTunes made it possible now that I can just sit with my remote on Prime and be like, yeah, I'll pay $3 for that. Sometimes I'll pay $3 rather than just going through the hassle of trying to go get it for free for some hacky way. Like $3-5, just play it, And so that was made possible because finally he convinced certain artists to say, listen, there's going to be DRM. You're not just going to lose all your intellectual property rights. It opened up the whole thing. Think about Kindle, what that unlocked too. Like that unlocked a whole world. A pure anarchist, bring it all down. It's not a viable path. Now, does that mean there won't always be some real garage experimentation, anarchy? Surely not. There always will be, and I love that stuff. But that will be the more high risk, edgy, kind of fringe type of stuff. And so I think they both come together.
I agree. Crypto, for someone who's inexperienced, first learning about it, it's a very scary innovation, right? We're not used to it being in our everyday lives, right? So when we start learning about it, if you're in DC or whatever, you're very scared, okay, hold on, what are they doing here? But you know what else was very scary when it didn't exist? The internet, right? The internet, that was, when that first came out, it's like, oh man, our enemies could do this, and they could be anonymous, and we should clamp down on this. And you know what the US said? That, you know what? No, maybe you're right. Maybe this internet thing, maybe, yes, our enemies or people will be doing unethical things about it, but at the same time, this is going to be a place of innovation where we can greatly grow U.S. influence. Imagine if the U.S. said, oh, this internet thing, too scary, we're done, no. You're banned from using internet, building internet, etc. Imagine if Facebook and Google, imagine they all set up shop in Europe or somewhere else. Imagine the economic impacts that would have on the U.S. So when we think about U.S. regulators, yeah, they want to make sure that, again, people paying taxes, no money laundering. If this is going to be an area that does what it's expected to do and be extremely rapidly growing in terms of innovation, I don't think the U.S. regulators want to be the one country in the world that completely bans it and doesn't want any part of it, right? They're going to want to create a framework so that it's legitimized, it gives people the tools to build, because right now, as of this moment, it is way easier to build new stuff in Europe and other places. There is a lot of regulations in the US that's preventing a lot of innovation from happening right now. But those talks are happening now. The Senate and the House, they're listening. And again, I can't predict the future, but depending on who holds what seats where, I can't imagine that the US is going to be outright ban all this stuff. There's so much innovation, so much potential prosperity for innovators in the country to keep them within the borders of the U.S. and the town that wants to build in this area. So I think it's going to be all right. But who knows? You never know. I'm not going to get real political here, but certain people, certain sides of the political spectrum might be really anti, and who knows if they get voted in and once it's allowed and how these things work. You're right, it could be risky, it could shut things down, but I don't think it's going to happen goals there.
This has been great for me, thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Some last housekeeping. Okay, thank you everyone for being here. We have a Discord group. It's not super active, but we're chatting in there here and there. We're trying to build it up.
Join in there, we'll give you free stuff sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So with the Discord server, if you're not already on that, see me or Justice or emails or something, and we can get you the link for it. We keep it extremely private because we do not want hackers and scammers and everything to get in there. So you need a link from us, right? We will not be approved unless you go through us, just because we are.
And the reason why it's not like as active as you hop into other Discord servers, because literally no one's in there unless they sat in one of these chairs. That's the point, that's the feature. Now, if you scan this QR code, I'll leave it up when we're done. This will take you to a form. Many of you have already filled out this form. We would ask every time we do one of these if you would be willing to fill it out again, not necessarily get into the Discord server, but part of this form is to say what area are you most interested in hearing about, and this kind of signals to us which direction to take things, and then that.
We want to cater this to you. Justice and I are lucky and blessed enough to be really interested in this crazy sector, and we love talking about it. We want more people and friends to chat about it with and teach and learn from. And if you're in that camp too, we want to make sure that we're collaborating. So yeah, let us know what you want to hear about, what you like, what you don't like. We're happy to change these things. This venue is very consistent until we outgrow it. I'd probably say we're going to stick with this venue for a while. But yeah, tell your friends. We need at least 30 people in here to make us break even.